what we mean when we say that romantic love should not be a primary source of fulfillment. We think that this currently looks like things like peer pressure on both men and women to get married and get hitched. We think it's often impacts the self-esteem of singles because they feel as though if they haven't gotten a romantic partner by a certain age, it somehow means that they are less worthy and somehow means that they're less deserving of love. We refers to society saying that if you're not married by 35, you're basically undesirable and not worthy of respect. We see this all the time in many Asian countries. We're pretty sure it happens in most Western countries as well. What does the counterfactual look like in terms from government? We think that this means that people will find fulfillment in different ways. This can refer to other social interaction, like for instance with other friends, or in other things as well, like for instance your career or your hobbies. We are not saying that we cannot have romantic love whatsoever. Let's be very clear about that. What we are saying is that the primary source of fulfillment in your life should not solely be focusing on romantic love. People can still choose to accept romantic love. We don't think there should be undue societal pressure on people to have that romantic love. Given this, government is going to bring you two arguments. First, this is bad for singles, and two, this is bad for women. First, this is bad for singles. We think this is because of two reasons. First, they're pressured to find romantic love primarily through society pressuring them to do certain things that they otherwise would not have done. For instance, we already see many a time that men who are seen as family men are, for some strange reason, promoted above others in the workplace. Why is the case? Because society is a recognition that somehow having a family and being loved and having children somehow means you're more than worthy, even though there's absolutely no reason why this is necessarily the case. Other societal pressures include that from family and friends. Secondly, this is also internalized as well as a result of society constantly telling you that your only way to be worthy and essentially wanted in this world is to be having a romantic partner by a certain age. You yourself feel as though in order to do so, I must do and get romantic love, and if I don't, I am somehow far less worthy. We think therefore this is bad in and of itself, in spite it hurts people's self-esteem, it can often lead to mental health issues and people questioning whether they're worthy, right? But moreover than that, we have three unique impacts. The first is that for singles themselves. We think the vast majority of the time, people want to have other interests and want to desire fulfillment from other areas as well, right? Like for instance, if I'm a woman and I want to have fulfillment through my career, oftentimes this is cut short by the fact that society tells me I am forced by my parents and my friends essentially to get a boyfriend and get married. We think it is simply undue and unfair a coercion on people to say that the only way you can find fulfillment in your life is to be married and not to the other ways that people can choose for themselves. So we think this is coercive on the first level. Secondly, we think it's uniquely harm individuals who usually cannot find romantic love because of society's unfair recognition of conventional standards of beauty, right? So for instance, people who may be physically disabled or people who are seen as conventionally are not beautiful are not likely to find love. We think this is unfair for them, and we think that they can equally find fulfillment in life without having to play into this romantic thing as well. We think this applies to the mentally disabled. We think that they are not worth less, and given that right now society tells them they're worth less because they cannot find love, that is a bad thing. The final thing we're going to say here is that this is bad for romantic couples as well. Because insofar as we still have marriage in our sort of house, we think this marriage is far more likely to be considered and one that people can go into because they freely choose to, but not because society tells them and puts undue pressure on them to get married. What this means is that on the comparative, there are many cases on the other side of the house where people get married simply because they feel like they have to, and as a result, the marriage with them falls apart at a certain degree of time, right? Because they were rushing to it, they simply did it because they felt as though they had to do so. We think by giving people more freedom, these marriages are less likely to fall apart, and with all the constituent harms of, for instance, your mental health going down the drain, and all the associated financial harms to the individual as well. I just think it's a bad thing for singles in general to be forced to marriage. We think this narrative in society does too many people that. Second argument here is about how the other side harms women. We think that such societal norms telling women that they have to get hitched are discriminatory and furthermore lead to discriminatory outcomes as well when they do get married. Why is it the case? First, because women are once often expected to get hitched. It is quite strange often that the expectation is uniquely and majority on women to get hitched. But before I go on, yes.
Okay, assuming that the pressure to get married is the same as the motion, if you do find a successful partner, you're doubly happy because it's romantic love. If you don't, you have hope that you might find the one day.
No, that is simply not the case. I don't see why you'd be doubly happy. I think that in general, insofar as I know I want to love the person, I marry him, and this love is unique and essentially a wash on both sides of the house, right? We think the unique comparative coming up from our side is that on your side, there are lots of people who would otherwise have not gone into marriage, now going into marriage and therefore falling out and having lots of harms and heartbreak after that, right? That's a comparative, right? We are not saying that romantic love should not be a thing. We are just saying that people should be allowed to freely choose to enter into that rather than being forced by society to enter into that. So, no, thank you. Back to my point about how women are the ones uniquely often expected to get hitched, right? Especially in many like conservative countries, they are the ones who are seen as dirty or unworthy because, as I mentioned earlier, of many societal standards tell them if you're not hitched by a certain age, it's because you're not beautiful. You must make yourself more eligible. I think this is uniquely sexist, and oftentimes men simply do not have as much harm or do not have as much expectation on them to have that as a result. Secondly, we think that more women go into a marriage as a result of this policy or the other house is actually itself sexist. Why is marriage itself sexist? First and foremost, we think because following from this policy and following from this narrative of romantic love being important often follows the idea that children is an important part of marriage, right? This is a simple part of like heteronormative societal expectations and societal narratives. The problem then, of course, is that women are the ones uniquely and solely expected to raise children, right? Even though there has been societal progress on this issue, we still think it's factually true that when women have children, their careers are the ones that are hit because employers think that they will not be working as hard as their male counterparts because they're the ones that have to stay at home, they are the ones that take maternity leave. We think that's a bad thing. Secondly, and more importantly, even if you don't accept that children's point by itself, we think that gender roles within marriage themselves are often sexist as well, right? Irrespective of whether these people decide to have children. So for instance, the idea that if you are a woman, you should earn less than your male counterpart because that's what society expects of you. The idea that even if that's the case, the women should do the majority of the housework, which is like an incredible bandwidth tax for women who cannot then fulfill and expand their careers as opposed to the man, right? So I think marriage itself is uniquely sexist. No, we are not saying that women cannot choose these situations for themselves given that they know the risks. What we are saying is that given their narrative often forces women who otherwise would not have wanted all these constituent outcomes to choose this, they are the ones that are coercing women into a sexist situation, and we think that is uniquely bad. So, we think this policy is uniquely bad for singles, this narrative is bad, particularly for those who are not conventionally beautiful or attractive. It is particularly bad in addition for women as well. Very proud to stand in opening government.
That's good. Okay, now whenever you're ready.
Alright, so in this motion, I don't think we necessarily have to defend the institution of marriage as it's experienced in all places in the world. I don't think we have to defend religious norms that are imposed on people all across the world, and I don't think we have to defend like the norm of the patriarchy necessarily. We just have to show why romantic love is an extremely important force of fulfillment in people's lives, brings happiness to many people, and makes people's relationships fundamentally better. I think we win on those metrics in our case. All right. First, fulfillment. Why we think there needs to be another source of fulfillment, and why we think romantic love is one that is very attainable. Right. So we think that necessarily people are going to try to find a source of fulfillment in their life. First, because like in general, society is organized by like really trying to push people into trying to find fulfillment and feeling happy in general. But like also as well, people tie this to happiness, and when they accomplish things that they feel fulfilled because of, they oftentimes feel happiness, right? So we think as well like that probably this means that there are things that would replace this as a way of promoting government. They say like sometimes that might be friendship, but also as well like I think this could be things like financial success and jobs and things like that we think might be very, very damaging for people to tie their entire existence to it. We think that romantic love is unique in one way. Why do we think this is? Because romantic love is not just something that you can experience when you're in it, but it's also something that you can really feel like in the future there is hope for. And that hope can bring you joy, just knowing that there might be somebody out there or some people out there who could really bring you happiness through romantic love. We think that this is incredibly important because it's happiness even when you're not necessarily in this. They try to tell us that just because you feel like dejected because you haven't found love yet, that means you're going to necessarily be unhappy. We think instead that probably it's more important to think that you can find love in the future and know that you can possibly have love in the future, because we think that it can be experienced oftentimes when you're in a bad situation, right? When you have like very little money, you probably are in a bad place to achieve educational or financial success. when you're in a place in the world where you might not have access to other sources of fulfillment that people have. But instead, we think that romantic love is something that you probably can aspire to, and something that you can feel is attainable, so you don't feel necessarily down and out. We think that that is incredibly, incredibly important to your happiness and your future success, right? We think as well, people's behavior is dictated by what gives them fulfillment, right? We think that romantic love is something that when you're trying to pursue it, necessarily what you want to do is try to reach out in your relationship.
Okay, point.
And try to make sure that other people are happy with you. Yeah.
So on your side of the house and on our side of the house, people can still experience love. The problem OG told you is that specifically when love is the primary thing that brings you fulfillment, that takes away fulfillment from everything else in people's lives because they haven't found love yet.
All right, so we think as well that like when people tie their livelihood and their fulfillment to things that they're going to have a much harder time to attain and feel like they never can attain, we think that's incredibly damaging. We think love uniquely is something that can transcend borders and can transcend different types of situations. We think that's incredibly important. But how do we treat others when this is what makes us fulfilled, right? We think that we treat others as someone like who possibly could be that person. We think that that's incredibly, incredibly important in how we treat each other. When your fulfillment is based on necessarily how you interact with others and to the extent that people feel a connection with you, we think that this is incredibly important in how you act and your own happiness, but also the happiness of those around you. We think when you have this norm, that's an incredibly important part of your life and something that just brings joy to other people within your lives because of the way you treat them. I think that's incredibly important. But also, I think that this has some points that clash very much so with what we hear from opening government, right? We think as well that women are more objectified to the extent that men see them as sexual objects oftentimes. And that men think of them as something that is not like a romantic partner, but instead someone to be sexually used. We think that that is an incredibly, incredibly damaging one. We think that romantic love is something that necessarily counters this, because men don't have to see women only as something that can be like a sexual object, only as someone that they should marry because of like religious reasons, etc. But
Okay,
someone who should be a partner and a romantic partner, someone that has like give and take and in their lives. We think that that is incredibly important in making sure that like the relationships between men and women and that they are more fair and are more and go both ways. And lead to happiness for both people, and that women are not treated by men to be like thrown out at any moment, you know. So I think as well, like a large portion of their case really relies on the fact that like romantic love is necessarily linked to marriage. So we think on our side of the house that marriage probably exists either way. Right? We think that the religious institutions and the government institutions that try to get people into becoming married are not necessarily going to be something, are not necessarily going to go away just because this norm of the fulfillment based on romantic love is something that goes away as the primary drive in fulfillment for people, right? We think that these are very, very strong norms, and they have forced many people into these marriages before the norm of romantic love being fulfillment was something that was particularly prominent, like arranged marriages, etc. We think that that is incredibly damaging, right? But also, right, we think that that necessarily this is what allows people to leave marriages that they don't want to be into, right? Because we think that like the very institution of divorce is because romantic love is actually prioritized over the institution of marriage because it is something that is so important to people's fulfillment, right? We think that you think that it's very hard to break the norms of marriage when fulfillment isn't this primary driver. When romantic love isn't this primary driver for people, right? We think that people are more likely to side with like people divorcing their partners because they know that love is gone in those relationships, or something bad has happened that is completely incompatible with romantic love, right? Whether that is like domestic abuse or anything, right? We just think it's very important in allowing people to leave these marriages because this institution is so strong. You need a really strong social norm to allow people to understand your motives. I beg you to oppose.
Thank you. And now about Deputy Prime Minister. Here.
Sorry, 1 second. One second, sorry. Okay, cool. Can I start? Panel, I think the main problem with the opening opposition case is they haven't done one main thing. They haven't told us why love needs to be the primary and main source of fulfillment for individuals. Our case told you specifically that love can exist under our side of the house, and that love can be a place and an area that people can obtain fulfillment from. The thing is, they have to defend a world in which love is the primary source of fulfillment. If they tell you that fulfillment is important, and we have proven to you, and will continue to do so, that you actually have your sense of fulfillment impeded from every other area, the point at which you haven't been fulfilled in an avenue of love is the point at which you get less of that fulfillment on their side of the house, is the point at which we beat the opening opposition team. 3 main areas then in this speech. Firstly, we're going to talk about individual fulfillment and individuals that, don't ever find love. Secondly, we're going to talk about harms to women and what that means, and looking at the argumentation about leaving marriages that came out of the ELO. And then finally, I'm going to talk to you about, bring you a new point of talking about how this makes individuals less able to find fulfillment from other areas of life, bringing in a little bit more explicitly what our harm is, and talking a little bit more about what this means and why love is so harmful to other kinds of fulfillment. Cool. First area. They tell you that individuals need to find fulfillment, and that fulfillment can come through love, because love makes people happy. I think that this actually doesn't, as I said in my introduction, deal with the idea that love has to be a primary source of fulfillment. I understand, and we agree on Love Bench, that love can be something that does make people happy, and we think that if people can derive happiness from love, that's really, really good. However, we tell you that the norm of that love has to be the primary source of fulfillment detracts from other kinds of fulfillment. And we gave them a POI here. We asked them, you can still achieve love, and that's still fine under our side of the house. And the thing is, they said, well, when people tie their life to economic success or tie their life to something else, it's far less likely that they can achieve that than it is they can achieve, for example, a romantic relationship. Here's the issue, though. We on OG are not telling people to tie their fulfillment to anything specific, right? We're telling you that in a world in which love is not the main thing that people tie their lives to, they can choose what best suits them, right? So a lot of individuals can derive their primary source of fulfillment from a friendship, right? From someone that they think is a really, really good friend and helps them through certain problems. I think that's the kind of thing that people can't achieve, and I don't think that friends are far harder to find than love, which basically takes out the majority of the stuff they tell you on how hard it is to achieve economic success. Sure, other people might derive happiness from their economic success. Other people might derive their main fulfillment and their happiness from playing a sport or doing a hobby, right? The fact of the matter is, they haven't told you specifically why it is that love, being the primary source of fulfillment, is something so important and so necessary. What did we bring you, though, here, right? Joel told you that this is bad for people that can't achieve love, right? We told you very specifically that the point at which love is the main and primary fulfillment for people in their lives, that necessarily means that people that don't find this love or are late to find this love feel as if they are not achieving what they are meant to achieve in life, feel as if they aren't doing what human beings are supposed to do, feeling as if they are failing as a person, feeling as if there is some kind of reason within their own self as to why it is that they aren't achieving that success. That can literally mean like people that don't fit into conventional beauty standards and aren't managing to find love, literally feeling even worse about it, right? Because they are locked out of having what is quote unquote a good life and a fulfilled life because of the way they were born or the way they look. This can literally look like the self-esteem of these people really harmed to a massive extent, to the point at which they don't feel like they're achieving this kind of sense of fulfillment, right? And also to an extent is bad for romantic couples, because what it does is it increases the probability that a couple is going to rush into a marriage, or that someone is going to marry someone, or generally find love with someone that they're not ready to find love with, right? They told you that the institution of marriage and love are different. But the fact of the matter is, in response to our argument, but the fact of the matter is, we told you that one follows from the other, right? The point at which you being fulfilled and successful in life is you finding love, then the extension of that is marriage. They said, in closing opposition, nodded to this, that, oh, we don't have to support the institution of marriage, we don't have to support sexist norms, we don't have to support any of that. The thing is, they have to support a norm wherein the primary source of fulfillment for individuals is love. From that, all of these things naturally extend, right? It doesn't matter if they don't have to support those specific things. These things can arise from that, right? So people feeling really shitty about themselves arises from that necessarily. How else do they respond, right? So Hamza gives a POI where he says, you know what, in a world where the primary form of love, the primary form of fulfillment is love, you can either be doubly happy or you can still hope for love, right? I don't see why being happy and being hopeful for love is exclusive to their side of the house. I think you can still have that for us. However, your entire livelihood and individual fulfillment and self-actualization isn't tied to the idea of you finding love. I think that's the intrinsic difference. I think that's where we take it over them. Cool. Moving on to the second area, though, briefly about the harms to women that accrue. I'll take Hamza here.
If there's any primary meaning ever, someone will have it more than I do. I will be depressed while I don't have it. Can you justify any other meaning at all?
Sorry, say that again?
If I have any other primary meaning, if it's not love, I will have it, someone else will not have it, they will be depressed. Can you give me any other meaning which fulfills your own test?
Cool, so the fact of the matter is that the point at which individuals can choose what specific meaning they want to obtain from their own life, they probably are likely to achieve that, right? So when you have a friend and you think, you know what, this friendship is what brings me individual fulfillment, they already have that, right? Even if someone has it slightly more than you still have it to an extent far different from love, which also plays into the way individuals look and is harmful in that way. Looking at this area for women though, right, they told us they don't have to defend this, because I think Joel brings you really, really good analysis as to why the natural extension of this is the institution of marriage enforced in a lot of countries that expects women to be married and expects women to stay at home with their children. I think this was important because the dominant narrative is necessarily forced on women in a lot of countries that they need to be married and they need to find love. The response they gave is they don't have to defend this. We gave you this response, we gave you the response to this earlier. But then they also told you, oh, men see them as objects. The fact of the matter is that that's not really the comparative, because if love can exist under either side of the house, it's not clear to me as to why taking away this primary goal is what necessarily leads to that lack of fulfillment. Then they told you that people are more likely to leave things like abusive marriages. I just don't think they prove why people are specifically going to leave this marriage. All they say is there's some kind of separation between marriage and love. I think it is far more plausible to say that people are more likely to stay in these kinds of marriages, right? Why? Firstly, because they are desperate to find that sort of individual fulfillment, because they think they are in love and are therefore chasing that kind of love, because that love is what makes them feel fulfilled, what makes them feel important. But secondly, even if they have fallen out of love, it is a matter of perceptions. They want other people to think that they are successful in life, they have found that primary goal of fulfillment, so are likely to stay in that kind of abusive marriage even more. Looking finally though at this area of how this makes people less able to find fulfillment in other areas of their life. The premise here is literally just to say that people can be successful in many different ways. People can be successful in their workplace, people can be successful in their friendships. The point at which love is the main thing and the primary thing that people have to chase is the point at which however successful you are in any avenue other than love, you are never truly fulfilled as an individual. This is important because I just think that individuals feeling happy, feeling fulfilled, and not having self-esteem issues is a general positive. At the end of this, we've given you A, reasons why it is that marriage is, that the idea of love being a primary source is really bad for people that can't find it, but also secondly why this is oppressive for women. For all these reasons, I beg you to close.
Thank you, and I invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition. Here.
humanizes people and actually makes people more likely to accept their preferences. The thing about, they say, well, people can just choose the source of their happiness now, but they just have some sort of pick and choose situation. I think this is probably a poor characterization of how society and people's desires actually play out in the real world. Because I think that people probably seek something that they can firstly look up to and say, well, I've succeeded in my life and I've gone through all these trials and tribulations, but it's fine because I've achieved something from my life. And they want to especially measure that against other people, right? They want to see that the life that I've led has been in some way productive, in some way happy compared to somebody else. I think that's probably a natural human characteristic that people want. The reason why people see each other's romantic love and say, well, I want that too, is because they want to compare themselves and think that they have had a successful or happy life. I think that's probably natural, and I'm not sure why that's necessarily a bad thing. But I also think that it's just useful for a lot of corporations and societies for there to be some sort of norm that people aspire to, right? I think the fact that it is romantic love rather than the beauty industry pushing beauty standards standards on you, and therefore the thing that makes you the most like successful and happy is the fact that you're really beautiful. I think it's far less harmful that it's romantic love, something that's unconditional, something that is pretty attainable for most people, even if you don't aspire to some sort of financial or beauty standard. At that point, I'm not quite sure like why they can say that like, oh, this is the worst thing, and then the alternative is suddenly some sort of utopia. I also just think that the problem with most of their cases is that they just rely on this idea that like everything will just go back to normal, and so there wouldn't be any sort of pressure towards marriage, right? I think that the pressure towards marriage isn't just because of any sort of romantic thought. It's also because of marriage was conceived by especially Christianity in the past to be about like property and land and how you like control it, right? The fact that you could pass your property onto your siblings and there was some sort of contract involved in that. It's literally a legal contract for many people. It is in the Bible as some sort of like religious contract. It's not just like it's not like just a natural extension of romantic love. It's a natural extension of huge numbers of structures in society, right? I think at that point, when you accept that marriage is probably just going to happen on each side of the house, I think the fact that women aspire to marriage that is for love, and they want to marry for love, is just hugely more empowering in that sense, right? Because like, I'd rather have women who like maybe would like married when they maybe didn't want to be or whatever. I'd rather they married for love and had some sort of high standard about how they were treated, rather than literally marry because it is in their like religious book and they have been told they have to marry someone. And it doesn't matter if they respect you, it doesn't matter if they love you, it doesn't matter if they treat you well, as long as you are married, right? I think that's the kind of pressure that people, especially women, are put under on their side of the house, and I think that's hugely worse, at the point at which they're more likely to be mistreated and they're less likely to be happy in the first place, right? I also think that women just get to demand love to some extent in like all sides of their lives. I think Matt gave a good characterization of this, but I think it's worth rebuilding. At the point at which women are told that they have to they are worthy of love, that they should prioritize love in their lives, and that men are told that the way that you treat other people is to treat them with love, because the way that you have relationships with other women is by loving them rather than just like having sex with them. I think that means that men are pressured into treating women slightly better than they otherwise would be, because there's at least some sort of pressure that you're meant to have some romantic love, attention, romantic sense of it, right? I think at the point at which like your fulfillment is surrounded by the fact that you have to do something romantic in order to have some sort of relationship with the person that you want to have like sexual relations with, I think you're more likely to not just like go around being really mean to women. And then they say like, oh well, like people will just rush into marriages and then stay in them and they'll be really unhappy, and that's really bad, right? I'd say again, firstly, I think the marriages that you rush into are at least for love, and you have a lovely fling and then you have a divorce. I'm not quite sure why that's a bad thing, other than being trapped in a loveless marriage that you literally got into because your family told you to, because it's part of your religion, or because like you have to do it because you're quite not affluent, and then you have to marry a man who's affluent because otherwise you literally won't have any life stability. I think those are worse marriages to rush into and stay into. But I also think that actually prioritizing romantic love means you're more likely to like wait for the one and have like a higher standard of the person you're going to marry, because you want to fall in love with somebody and that's what's fulfilling for you. If you're not in love and you're being told that if you're not in love then you're not truly fulfilled, then I have absolutely no idea why you're going to like suddenly stay in this marriage if you're being told that it's not the thing you want to do. I think people are more likely to marry for love and stay in marriages because of love rather than just like some sense of duty, which is just hugely worse than. So closing half point?
Yeah.
You sure?
Can you tell me why it is okay for those who do not fit conventional standards of beauty on your side of the house to be made to feel like shit?
Okay, I think that the point at which, it's an example of just like, I think that probably beauty standards will occur because like people will exploit people's need to be more fulfilled. I also just think that beauty standards aren't like unique to romantic love. I think at the point at which people just like people to look like them, and they don't like people or they don't connect with people, even in a platonic sense, who don't fit that standard of beauty. I'm not sure why. Also, I just think that like women not marrying into loveless marriages for money is probably just like more of an impact than some people feeling sad about their way they look, even if that marginally gets worse. So I think just the last point, going on from that, it's like when we see romantic love as important, I think it also humanizes people, because happiness and romantic love is seen as one and the same thing, and therefore romantic love is seen as at least some sort of break, right? People like, it's important to people's people's lives and you should respect that. That means, like, on their side of the house, when romantic love is, like, not that important, it doesn't matter if you don't attain it or if you're not allowed to attain it, right? I think on our side, when, like, someone who is gay expresses their desire to love someone freely and, like, actually, like, want to have that life fulfillment through maybe going through another social norm, it's accepted to us at least slightly more of a greater extent, because it's seen as important. It's important to that person's life in order for that to be respected. And therefore, anything that they say that may be against other social norms is actually fine, because that's the primary social norm that we need to respect. I think that means you're more likely to get people accepting same-sex marriage at the point at which they see the fact that you should be able to love freely as some sort of human right. I think that means you're humanizing people who want to go into marriages that don't necessarily respect entrenched social norms, such as interracial marriages. It means you're more likely to respect somebody who just wants to, like, who just wants to kind of, like, be happy in a relationship with multiple people. I think at that point, when you're actually allowing people to destroy social norms that are incredibly pervasive and harmful to loads of people, because you at least prioritize love, which is a probably good thing, as Matt has told you, over anything else, I think we win this debate.
Thank you, and I invite the government member.